Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Michelle Sander, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is unit conversion, otherwise known as dimensional analysis. So the learning target that you're going to write at the top of your page is you want to be, at the end of the session, able to convert from one unit into another unit using a ratio that compares the two of them together. So remember that unit conversion is a technique that we use, and it uses the concept of a ratio. So an example of a ratio for a unit conversion might be using 12 inches compared to 1 feet. These two things are equivalent. They're a ratio we can use to convert between feet and inches. You may have heard of this called unit analysis. You may have also heard of this as called dimensional analysis. So why do we use units? Well, units are a standard of measurement that allow us to compare something that is measured to a known standard. It allows us to basically communicate information about the world around us in ways that we might not otherwise mean to. Last time we talked about naked numbers, and naked numbers are those that have meaning, but without the units that they are applied to, they're just that. They're theoretical numbers. So if I said the number 5, do I mean 5 chairs? Do I mean 5 clouds? Am I talking about 5 grams? The unit absolutely matters. Without it, the number has absolutely no meaning. So which unit should we use? It depends on the job that you're doing. It wouldn't make sense for me to measure my height in millimeters because it would be a really large number. Instead, I usually use feet and inches because I'm in the US. But in Europe or South America or pretty much anyone outside of the US, you might use the metric system and measure yourself in meters. Another example is sometimes using a smaller unit gives a little bit more information to the listener. When I was a young parent and I had a child who was 24 months, that's 2, that's developmentally very different from a child who is 36 months or almost 3. So talking to another parent, I can communicate more information if I break it down into months. So the skill that we're going to use, converting, is all about changing a measurement into an understandable unit. So the really, really important thing to remember, and it's so important, I put my caps lock on, that when you change the unit of measurement of the thing that you've measured, the value doesn't change. We talked a little bit yesterday about how I'm 5'4", and I'm also a certain number of centimeters or meters. I think it's 1.65 meters. It doesn't change how tall I am, I'm just changing the way that I choose to report it. So another skill that you'll need to know is how to interpret a unit prefix. A unit prefix. So we're using the metric system, and what that means is the prefix attached to the unit gives us its own internal ratio. You probably already know that 1 meter is equivalent to 100 centimeters. But that term can be applied to any other base unit. You could have like a centiliter or a centigram. That prefix of 1 to 100 is consistent no matter what measurement that you're using. You may also know that kilo represents 1,000, so that 1 kilogram is equal to 1,000 grams, or 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters. So these are ratios that are identified by the prefix ahead of the unit. Same thing with data. If you have 1,000 bytes of data, that makes a kilobyte. So you won't need to remember these, but you will need to know how to use this chart. So here we have a couple of common prefixes. For example, we talked about centi, we talked about kilo, and you can pull any ratio you want out of this by comparing the meaning to the example. So 1 meter is equivalent to 1 meter, obviously. One decameter is equivalent to 10 meters. 1 kilometer is equivalent to 1,000 meters, and so on and so forth. Now, this is a resource, so that means you're able to look this up anytime you need it and use these ratios as you see fit. The ones that I would try to commit to memory, just because they're so common, are your kilo, your kilometer, your kilo prefix, your milli prefix. Those tend to be the two that I use the most often in school. So, as I mentioned, there's a really easy method for taking care of units and converting between one unit that you are given and a unit that you're trying to solve for. And sometimes this method is called the picket fence method. It might seem a little cumbersome at first, especially for one-step operations, but once we get to the point where we're doing 2, 3, 4, even 5-step operations, this technique actually becomes more efficient and really valuable tool for you. So we're going to try practicing this picket fence technique on a quantity that I think you already know. So let's say that you're given 6 inches and you're asked to find some number of feet. Now in our heads we could probably do this because we're really familiar with this unit conversion. 6 inches is equivalent to half a foot. But let's make sure that we can prove that to be true using this picket fence technique. So given 6 inches, we need a ratio that compares inches to feet. We know that for every 12 inches is equivalent to 1 foot. So I have inches, I have something that compares inches to feet. Now I need to have my method for solving for feet. I'm going to do something called a picket fence method. I'm going to take my given unit and put it right here in the upper left-hand box. So this is going to be 2 fractions that I'm multiplying together. Why am I turning 6 inches into a fraction? You'll see in a moment. It just kind of helps me mentally understand that it's a unit that I'm going to multiply. So I'm going to do something here, and I'm going to assume you're familiar with this algebraic concept, that anything divided by 1 is still itself. 6 inches divided by 1 is still 6 inches. I'm just using this as a bookkeeping technique. Now I'm trying to take the unit of inches, get rid of it, and turn it into feet. One easy way to get rid of something that's in the numerator is to divide by that same quantity in the denominator. So right next door, I'm going to put inches in the lower right-hand corner. And so that way, when I do the calculations, inches divided by inches is going to be 1. So it'll essentially get rid of that for me. All right, so I have one piece of information that I've added right here. I need to add one more piece of information, the 12 inches and 1 foot ratio. Well, I already have inches down here, and the 12 corresponds to the unit inches. So I'm going to go ahead and stick that 1 foot on top. Now what this technique suggests that we do is multiply across everything on top and divide across everything on the bottom. But first, let's take a look at what's going on with our units. I have inches divided by inches. Those cancel out. I have no units with the 1, and I have the unit of feet left over. So when I complete this calculation, I'm going to have feet and some number. So multiplying across, I have 6 times 1 is 6, divided by 1 is 6, divided by 12 is 0.5. And look at that, I've proven that 6 inches is equivalent to half a foot. All right, we're going to try this again, but we're going to use a different unit of measurement, one that might not be as familiar. So for this next exercise, we're going to take a look at some of these ratios. We may not need all of these in these problems, but we may need to have this information on hand. So we'll just leave that there for now, and we'll move on to the next question. Convert 0.43 kilometers into miles. So let's take a look at what we're given. We're given 0.3, let me erase that, 347 kilometers, and we're asked to find miles. We don't know how many miles this is, so we need a ratio that compares the number of kilometers to the number of miles. Let's go see if we can find one. Here we are, 1.6 kilometers for every 1 mile. So I'm going to write that right here. All right, so I always start with the given in the upper left-hand corner, 0.347 kilometers. Set it over 1, just so it becomes a numerator, and it's easy to remember that way that I need to multiply it. All right, I need to get rid of kilometers, and the only way to do it when there's a unit in the numerator is to put it down here in the denominator, kilometers. So what unit up here at the top gives me a ratio between kilometers and miles? Here it is, 1.6 belongs to the kilometer, 1 belongs to the mile. All right, so now I have the quantity I started with, a ratio that compares the two quantities to one another, and I'm ready to solve. So I like to always start by canceling out the units. All right, kilometers divided by kilometers is 1, so I cancel those out. The only unit that I have left is the mile, so I'm going to go ahead and write that there, mile. And now I get to do some math. I get to take 0.47 times 1, because everything on the top gets multiplied. Take that all and divide by 1, divide by 1.6. So I'll get my little handy dandy calculator here. Times 1 divided by 1 divided by 1.6. You could always leave out the dividing by 1 because you know it's going to end up being the same number. But if you're concerned about doing it, you don't want to skip any steps, go ahead and use the ones if you like. All right. I came up with 0.216 miles. So every 0.347 kilometers is equivalent to 0.216 miles. All right, and that's the picket fence method. Let's do one more together, and then I'm going to give you some to do on your own. And when you're doing these on your own, pause the video so that you can check your work, and then start the video again so you can see if you got it right. All right, our next problem that we're going to do together is to convert 870 kilograms into pounds. So let's write down what we're given. I'm using pink this time. Given 870 kilograms, we need to find how many pounds that correlates to. So I need a ratio. I need some true statement that compares kilograms to pounds. I don't know that off the top of my head. So I'm just going to scroll up and see if I can find one here. Let's see, kilograms, pounds, kilograms, pounds. Ah, here it is. 1 pound is equivalent to 0.454 kilograms, 0.454. I'll write that down here. 1 pound. All right, setting up our picket fence, take the given quantity, always drop it up there on top, 870 kilograms. Set it over 1 so that it becomes a fraction that I can do some operations on. Now let's think about what goes in the next step. We want to cancel kilograms, so I'm going to put it down below. And then I just find whatever number corresponds to that unit and stick it next to it. Up on top, this is the number I'm trying to solve for, will always, or the unit that I'm trying to solve for will always go here in the upper right-hand corner. So we're trying to solve for pounds. Oops. And the number that corresponds to the unit of pounds here in our given statement, here in our true ratio, is 1. So first things first, let's take care of the units before we do any math on it. Kilograms divided by kilograms is 1, so those cancel out. Multiply everything on the top, divide by everything on the bottom, and we'll see what we've got. All right, I came up with a nice big 1,916 and some change pounds. So 870 kilograms is expressed in units of pounds, 1,916 pounds. All right, so for these next ones, I want you to pause the video, try it on your own, and then I'll show you the work at the very end. Can you convert 84 ounces to milliliters? Write down the given, write down the find, and find a ratio in the earlier set of ratios that compares ounces to milliliters. Set up your picket fence, multiply and divide, and let's see how you did. So let's see how you did compared to my answers. I wrote down the given, 84 ounces. I know that I need to solve for the number of milliliters, so I wrote that down as well. And where did I get this ratio? I just scrolled up a little bit and found it in our ratio bank right here. And so I set up my little picket fence, put the given in the upper left-hand corner, as always, set it over 1 so that it becomes a nice, easy fraction. And then on the other side, how do I decide where to put which one goes where? Well, remember, I'm trying to cancel out the ounces, so I always want to stick that unit that I'm trying to get rid of on the bottom. The unit that I'm trying to find always goes in the upper right-hand corner. That's how you know you did it right. Then I multiplied through the top numbers, divided by the bottom numbers, and I came up with 2,470 milliliters. Okay, pause the video and try these last three. This time I'm only going to give you the answers so you can see if you did it right. So how'd you do? Converting 82 miles into feet, you should have gotten a much larger number because feet are a smaller unit than miles. I got 432,960 feet. Converting gallons into barrels, I got 0.110 barrels. And for the final problem, 45 quarts into gallons, the answer is 11.25 gallons. Now, if you feel good about that, we're going to move on to some multi-step unit analyses. And in this case, I think you'll see why the picket fence is so useful, because instead of doing one calculation, then another calculation, then a third, we're just going to set up a bigger picket fence and do it all at once. It's a much quicker and more efficient way. So in this method, as I said, there's no need to stop after each calculation. We're going to do a couple of multi-step conversions, and instead of doing one picket fence and a second picket fence, we're just going to make a longer fence to solve for the unit that we're trying to get. So let's take a look. Convert 746 days into centuries. All right, let's start out with what we're given. We are given the starting unit of days, 746 days. And we're trying to find centuries. Now, there's a couple of ratios that we're going to need to get there. I don't know off the top of my head how many days are in a century, but I do know how many days are in a year. 365 days corresponds to 1 year. I also know that a century means 100 years. So I'm going to write that down as well. 100 years equals 1 century. All right. I'm going to set up a kind of a long picket fence because I don't know how long this is going to take yet. The rule of thumb says always put the given in the upper left-hand corner, 746 days. Set it over 1 so it's easy to see where you multiply and divide. And now we have to do a little bit of thinking. How do we know what unit to use next? Do I use the 100 years in the century? Do I use the days to the years? Well, we know one thing. We know that days will have to go on the bottom. And the reason that we know that is because we want those units of days to cancel out. So let me go up here and find a ratio that has the information of days. Oh, there it is. 365 days corresponds to 1 year. All right, well, that's good, but I'm still not where I want to be. I need to go one more step and get to centuries. So I'm going to make another line in my picket fence. I'm going to choose to put the unit of year down here because I want to get rid of it and I want to get to centuries. So now what? I got to find a way to get from year here on the bottom to centuries for my final unit answer. So I have one more ratio. Here it is. 100 years corresponds to 1 century. All right, cool. It looks like I'm done. Those years cancel out. My final unit is century, which is what I want. So I think I'm ready to multiply through. Century. Oh, maybe I should make that a little bit better. That's better. All right, so let's multiply everything on the top first and then divide everything on the bottom. So take my handy calculator, 746 times 1 year times 1 century divided by 1 divided by 365 divided by 100. Let's see what I get. All right, it's a really small number, which is what we can expect. 746 days, that's just over 2 years. So we know that this is going to be a fraction of a century. And indeed, our answer is 0.02 centuries. So that's it for now. Next time we meet as a class, we're going to practice this picket fence method using single step and multi-step problems. I'll see you next time. Have a great day.